In 1940, the black population in Boston was under 10,000. By 1950, it had grown to close to 50,000, like 47, 48,000. By 1960, it was close to 80,000, and by 1970, it had passed 100 and was still growing. I don't know what it is today. And there were conflicts among black people. You know, the Boston folk didn't exactly relish the Mississippi people coming in, or the Puerto Ricans, or the Haitians. And then there's still things I wonder about, like blacks and Puerto Ricans got along better than blacks and Haitians, who looked more alike, kind of thing. And I never quite found out, you know, what that was about, but those are some of the emerging realities of the urban landscape. I knew Ted was different. I'd expected him to be a brown man because, you know, people told me, I got to South End House about 2 weeks before Ted, and they said, Ted Parrish is coming. And I said, Ted Parrish? Yeah, you know, the guy that played football at Brown, and he got honors, and he did this, and he did this. So, you know, then I found out that not only was he a brown man from Brown University, but he was also brown. Wow, that's going to be interesting.
What year was that?
1950.
58,
7 or 8.
Yeah.
You were just coming out of college.
Yeah.
What was it, 58?
57 I finished Brown.
Okay.
But I started working the South End 58, 59. One of the things that John did not experience that I did, I believe, is the black self-hatred that's prevalent. Not yesterday when we were out there doing all this stuff, but even today. A number of the units that we were able to get into the hands of low and moderate income people occupied by blacks. And they, like other folks, sometimes don't have the money to pay their rent, and because of decisions that they make, by the way. And I have been forced in a role of being sort of like a landlord, and I've had to talk with some of these folks. I remember so very clearly, there were a couple of twins, obese, way behind their rent, and I know Jackie won't want me to say this, but when it came time for them to have to leave, I went down and tried to talk with them, got them to get out partially, and I went in to clean up to get ready for the next tenant. And behind the couch in this place, there was a pail with, what are those things called, Jackie?
Oh, like tampons.
Tampons, full of tampons. I went to the girls, and they're about 26, 27, and I said, at least you could have cleaned up after yourself. The girls got angry. They weren't girls, they were 23, 24, 25. One of them called me a black mother, you know the rest.
Yeah.
And the other one called me a black bee. And I always wondered, now, which one of these things am I? That's just one example of the note that say you black, you black. That was simply a way of saying I hate myself and anything black. And I can understand. They're working in a laundry, getting peanuts for pay, and here they see me. They view me as an affluent, educated man. The kind that they say or think keeps them down, which is not true. So I've been cursed at by them and so many others.
But you know, Ted, we've experienced some of the same things with the children, say. One of Leah's schoolmates, this is my daughter, sort of picked her up when they had an altercation and threw her in a ditch off of the school bus.
Wow.
The boys developed enough skill to avoid, and maybe boys do, some of the conflict. And then more recently, a grandson who lives with his parents, lived with his parents in Little Rock, Arkansas, lived on a high hill in an upscale community. And there was some lower income, Section 8, I guess it was, housing about a mile away, and they had a separate bus. So Alexander asked, how come one bus comes to my neighborhood and drives all over the place, and the other one goes directly to this other neighborhood? Isn't that sort of a practice of racism? And they said, well, Alexander, if you want to ride on the other bus, you can ride on any bus that goes where you want to get off. So he rode the other bus, and they kicked his ass
Wow.
because he lived in a big house. And then there's some kind of awareness that kids have, some of it's innocent. The same grandson, I took him to Rosedale because I felt some ownership in the brick houses they built there. Johnny Todd.
Yeah,
Johnny Todd had gone to Atlanta University where I went to school. He was from Rosedale, Mississippi. Came back, got himself elected mayor, built housing, opened a park, did a lot of really, really good stuff. And it was 3-bedroom brick houses, which were, and they had running water and all that good stuff. So my grandson Alexander said, but Pa, why are they so teeny tiny? Just a different perspective.
Oh, Johnny Todd was one of the persons in the Bolivar County Health Council,
Yeah.
and I think he learned some of his stuff from all those meetings we had, and that prompted him and one other fella to run for elective office back then. I forget the other guy's name.
What was it? Was it Shelby? Or?
Yeah.
Goodness. I know his mother, but I can't remember his name either. But yes, that was a time of ferment, and Todd gave leadership to the community after he came back for Atlanta University that I consider a step above in getting blacks organized. He did housing developments, he did recreation. And, you know, and I think education had, given him a different perspective of what people are entitled to, and some skills on how to pursue it. I know a good part of that story is he called me one day and said, John, I need $1 million. I said, Johnny, I don't have it. But together we found out who did, and I think it was the AKA sorority. I think that's who it was. Because they had been involved in Mount Bio years ago in putting together a hospital or something. And they came through again with a federal something match that enabled the development of a wonderful recreation area. So, you know, there are rewards to this work, but, you know, there's sometimes rough spots.
Do you remember what year that was? That what you were just telling about in Rosedale? What year? What the calendar
in
year?
Mississippi?
Yeah.
We went there in 1970 and stayed a little over 3 years, and then Ted came on.
Do you mean 1960?
No, it's 19.
Yeah, we were down there, John, earlier than that, because I left Washington, D.C. in '64, I believe it was, and I went
We
down to
actually
Mississippi.
moved there,
Pardon?
I think, in what, no, wait a minute.
1960.
1960 something.
60,
Yes,
Yeah,
it
it was
was.
in the 60s.
Yes, it was.
We returned, I think.
Oh, we
in
came
70.
here in 70.
70, yeah.
Right, that's right, that's right.
The late 60s when you moved down.
So Ted and I have been following each other for
Yeah, long,
No, I've been
50
following him.
years.
it's amazing,
That's a
yeah.
long time.
Actually, it's 60 now. 60 years you've been following, I think, because 58.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Ted, you might mention, I don't know that it's
Yeah.
explicit enough about the Tenant Development Corporation, that it was
Yeah.
started and it was run by the tenants, and 50 years later, it's still
That's right.
run
That's a good point.
by the tenants.
Well, you know, when I
You
first
know,
went to
that-
they didn't
that
tell
is
me
something.
he was black. They told me he was a brown man. You know. Well, okay, and in Boston, you're supposed to bow down about 2 inches when you're from Brown, Harvard, MIT, you know. So that's one of the problems that sort of had with Ted. He could talk to the poor folk, but he could still call on Brown. And that's kind of you know, what kind of brown man is he?
Well, one thing I didn't mention, John, and you did this too, the political times obviously affects anybody who is working in resource-challenged communities. And one has to be in a position to express in words why the federal or the state or local money would be wisely spent if. And so, from the time I left Mississippi and came back here, started working in the 70s, I've gotten millions in money from environmental EPA, at the earlier time HEW, and then HHS, and these monies helped with organizing because you can pay people peanuts, and they'll do things like passing out flyers for the meetings, you know, and it's not really called pay, it's a stipend. But don't let that fool you. I remember Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams was up in Boston, and all he had to do was to take the flyer and put it at every door into tenant buildings. And there came a time when I know that some people had not done that. And I said on the Friday before, the one in particular I'm talking about, I said, now, I know some of you folks haven't put out your flyers. If I find you didn't put out your flyers this week, I'm not gonna give you a little $20. Well, Mr. Williams was about 15 years my senior. He came to the settlement house, 48 Rutland. Where's my check? Were you there then? I don't know.
Probably.
He said, where's my $20? I said, you didn't put out your flyers. He pulled out a switchblade knife.
Woo.
And he put it right here. You don't give me my so-and-so check, I'm going to cut your neck off. $20.
Woo.
It's scary.
It really
It
is.
is. Yeah.
So when I left Central, I was put into the million dollar club. And up in Boston, I didn't get such an honor. That was simply, you know, a great social worker. But down here, I was taken into two things. Chapel Hill Hero, simply because of the things that we did with Pine Nose Community Center